There was a time when dinner didn't come from a box and flavor wasn't measured by convenience, but by gratitude. When survival meant stretching every dollar and meals weren't about luxury, but about life itself. This is a journey back to the kitchens of our grandparents, where thrift, ingenuity, and love turned the simplest scraps into the foundation of survival. You're watching Forgotten Meridian, where history fades beyond the line of time. Let's step into that old kitchen, the one that smelled like wood smoke, bread, and hope. The first dish on our table is one that's still beloved today. Mac and cheese, but not the boxed kind. There were no powdered packets, no microwaves, no instant comfort. Grandma made hers from scratch. A little butter, a spoonful of flour, and milk she'd stretched as far as it could go. When the mixture thickened, she stirred in bits of cheese, grated carefully from a small block that had to last the week. Then she poured the noodles and sauce into a baking dish, topped it with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, and baked it until the top turned golden and crisp. Back in the 1930s, cheese cost about 15 cents a pound. For less than half a dollar, a family of 6 could eat together. Warm, full, and grateful. Today, we chase truffle oils and imported blends. But back then, a bubbling pan of homemade mac and cheese was luxury itself. Next came the humble potato, the silent hero of the Great Depression kitchen. Potatoes grew in poor soil, stored easily, and filled the belly. From those small, dusty tubers came comfort, in the form of a dish so simple it almost defied its worth: potato soup. Grandma would dice potatoes and onions, let them simmer in water or milk until they softened, and season it with nothing more than salt and pepper, and sometimes a little celery leaf saved from the scraps. The whole pot cost less than 20 cents, but it carried the warmth of care. A hot meal even on a cold night when hope was thin. For Irish immigrants and struggling families alike, potato soup wasn't just food, it was dignity in a bowl. Even potato peels were never wasted. During World War II, posters hung in American kitchens reminding families, "Don't waste it, use it." And they did. Potato peel soup was born out of pure necessity. Grandma scrubbed the peels clean, simmered them with onions and salt, and thickened the broth with a bit of flour. It wasn't rich, but it was warm and filling. A bowl of that soup cost almost nothing, but it taught a priceless lesson that waste was a sin when hunger was near. They didn't see scraps, they saw survival. Then there was water pie, a dish that sounds almost impossible. No milk, no eggs, no cream, just water, sugar, and a bit of flour. Poured into a crust and baked slowly until it thickened into a soft, custard-like filling. During the Great Depression, this was known as the desperation pie, because even when the cupboards were bare, people still craved something sweet. Something that reminded them life was worth savoring. The ingredients were almost free, but the feeling it gave was priceless. Rice and beans were another constant companion. The pairing was more than convenience, it was survival science. Rice provided the carbohydrates, beans brought the protein, and together they formed a complete, nourishing meal. A pound of beans cost just 5 cents in the 1940s. Grandma would soak them overnight, then simmer them all day with a scrap of salt pork or a leftover ham bone. It was a meal that didn't need tending. It cooked slowly while she washed, mended, and worked. And when it was done, it filled not just plates, but the whole house with warmth. Even today, rice and beans carry the same quiet message, that simple food can still sustain greatness. Some meals had names that spoke their truth. Garbage soup was one of them, but don't let the name fool you. This was one of the most ingenious inventions of all. A single pot sat on the back of the stove all week long. Every day, scraps went in. Potato ends, bones, wilted greens, yesterday's leftovers, and tomorrow's hopes. Simmered and stirred over and over again until it became something nourishing, something new. It was called perpetual soup because it never really ended. It evolved, a living meal, a symbol of endurance. When breakfast came, one dish ruled humble kitchens everywhere. Biscuits and gravy, but not the kind made with butter and sausage we know now. Grandma saved every drop of meat drippings, bacon grease, chicken fat, or the last scrape of lard. She mixed it with flour, stirred it in milk or water, and turned it into a thick, peppery gravy. When there was no meat, she added more black pepper to trick the mind into thinking it was rich. The biscuits were made with lard too because butter was too precious. Simple flour, baking powder, and a prayer that the oven fire held steady. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling. And on cold mornings, that warmth was everything. Cabbage, another humble hero. It grew when other crops failed. It stored for months in root cellars. And it became the backbone of dishes like braised cabbage and sausage. A head of cabbage cost 3 cents. A single sausage could flavor the whole pot. As the meat cooked, its fat soaked into the cabbage and turning bitterness into sweetness, scarcity into comfort. It was a European immigrant's secret, a meal that traveled across oceans and stayed in American kitchens for generations. Lentil soup was another quiet miracle. Before superfoods were a thing, lentils were already doing the work. No need for soaking, no need for wealth, just a handful of lentils, an onion, a carrot, and water. They filled the pot with nutrition and filled the heart with reassurance. A single pound could feed a family for 2 days. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival disguised as kindness. Then came Sloppy Joes. The name says it all. Messy, simple, honest. Born during the Depression, it was how families stretched 1 pound of beef to feed 8 mouths. Grandma mixed breadcrumbs, oats, and sauce to make it go farther, then spooned the rich, sweet, tangy meat onto soft bread rolls. It wasn't just food, it was a small luxury. The feeling of biting into something hot, saucy, and satisfying, when most meals were thin soups and boiled roots. That's what made Sloppy Joes special. Not the ingredients, but the relief. Eggs were another saving grace. They were cheap, abundant, and endlessly adaptable. When meat was scarce, an egg could take its place. And one of the simplest, most beloved ways to stretch them was the egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs mashed with homemade mayonnaise, mustard, pickles, salt, and pepper, then spread thick on bread. It was the taste of thrift and care. 15 cents for a dozen eggs, enough to feed a household and still have some left for the next day. In the South and Midwest, cornbread and pinto beans were sacred. Simple, steady, and strong, like the people who made them. Pinto beans simmered all day, seasoned with whatever scraps of pork the family had. Cornbread baked crisp and golden in cast iron. Together, they formed a complete meal, a circle of sustenance that no one went hungry around. Even the leftovers found new life. Fried into patties for breakfast the next morning. Nothing wasted, ever. Leftover rice became fried rice long before takeout made it trendy. Grandma spread last night's rice to dry, then fried it with eggs, old vegetables, or scraps of meat. If soy sauce was too expensive, she used Worcestershire sauce instead, and it worked beautifully. It turned waste into wonder. A meal made of nothing that somehow became everything. Hot dogs were called the people's meat, and during the hardest years, they truly were. Boiled, fried, or grilled. They became dinner when nothing else could. Served with macaroni salad, they offered protein, starch, and comfort in one plate. Macaroni salad was cheap, too. Pasta, mayonnaise, pickles, and patience. And when it sat overnight in the icebox, the flavors deepened, just like family bonds around the table. Tuna casserole was another Depression miracle. Canned tuna, canned soup, and egg noodles. 3 shelf-stable ingredients that saved time, money, and hunger. It baked into something greater than its parts. Golden, creamy, humble, and good enough to make people smile again. In church cookbooks across the country, you'll still find this recipe scribbled in pencil, a quiet reminder that resilience can taste like home. Baked potatoes became entire meals. Roasted directly in fireplace coals, their skins crisped, while the insides turned soft and steaming. For 2 cents a pound, they fed families who had nothing else, sometimes topped with leftover chili, sometimes just salt and butter. They proved that comfort could come from the simplest fire. Grilled cheese and tomato soup became the unofficial meal of the Great Depression. 2 slices of bread, a bit of cheese, and a can of soup stretched to serve 4. When butter ran out, mayonnaise was used instead. It crisped the bread even better, and no one forgot the trick. That combination, hot, salty, creamy, and tangy, wasn't just lunch. It was a hug on a hard day. Stuffed peppers were a bit of clever showmanship. Rice, breadcrumbs, and a little meat, stuffed into peppers grown right in the garden. They were practical, beautiful, and full of care, and every part of the meal had a purpose. Every bite was a reminder that nothing had been wasted. Beef stew carried the same message. Tough, cheap cuts of meat that no one wanted, slowly simmered until tender. Potatoes, carrots, onions, all cooked together until the flavors married. The scent alone could lift spirits. Families gathered around a single pot, and for a moment the world outside didn't matter. By the 1950s, convenience arrived, but thrift never disappeared. Frozen tater tots met canned soup and ground beef, and tater tot casserole was born, cheap, filling, and communal. It showed that even in better times, people hadn't forgotten how to make much from little. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches might seem ordinary today, but during the Depression, they were revolutionary. A jar of peanut butter cost 25 cents and could make dozens of sandwiches. It was shelf-stable, cheap, and full of calories. The jelly was often homemade, boiled down from wild berries or whatever fruit was in season. Together, they fed a nation of children who needed energy to dream of better days. Cabbage rolls brought the old world into the new. A leaf softened in hot water wrapped around rice, scraps of meat, and tomato sauce. It was a dish of immigrants and survivors alike, proving that even the humblest foods could carry the taste of culture, home, and pride. Then came Spam, the miracle meat. Created in 1937, it became the cornerstone of wartime meals. Unrefrigerated, inexpensive, and salty enough to last forever. Sliced and fried, it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A lifeline for soldiers and families alike. For 25 cents a can, it kept millions alive. And for many, it still tastes like gratitude. As times changed, new cheap miracles arrived. Like instant ramen. Imported from Japan in the 1950s, it quickly became the American symbol of thrift. A packet, some hot water, and dinner was ready. But Grandma never left it plain. She cracked an egg into the broth, added scallions from her window garden, and turned that humble bowl into something rich and warm and human. And then there was spaghetti and marinara. The immigrant's gift to the American table. Canned tomatoes cost 10 cents. A pound of pasta, 15. Garlic, herbs, and patience turned those ingredients into something sacred. It wasn't just Italian food. It was survival art. Proof that the best meals don't come from wealth, but from care. The last dish in our story comes from far away, and yet it feels like home. Shakshuka. Eggs poached in tomato sauce, spiced with chili and cumin. It came to America with Middle Eastern immigrants who carried with them recipes born from scarcity. They showed that with nothing but eggs and canned tomatoes, you could still create beauty, still gather your family, still share warmth. And that's the lesson hidden in all these dishes. Every one of them was born from struggle, and yet each carried something sacred. Resourcefulness, love, and pride. Our grandparents didn't waste. They didn't complain. They turned whatever they had into enough, and maybe that's what we've lost. Today, surrounded by abundance, we forget that the true measure of a meal isn't how much it costs, it's how much care goes into it. Because food made from almost nothing still has the power to feed everything that matters. This was Forgotten Meridian, where history fades beyond the line of time. If you remember meals like these, or wish you could taste the stories they tell, subscribe and keep the legacy alive.